My course is maybe like composed of two components mainly in terms of the reading materials. The first group is about critiquing the industrial food system. The food we eat today is supplied mainly by the major corporations, either as the raw material that people buy, or that is the distribution and production may be controlled by big company. Or even if it is produced by the small farmer, then the ingredients to the process may come from the big company, including the fertilizers and pesticides and other chemicals. And silo may belong to the big storage company or transportation company, and then so forth. So I think we are really completely dependent upon. Completely is too strong, but then I think we are surrounded by this the gigantic corporations when it comes to our food systems. And as a result, I think our food got really cheap and maybe easy, ready to eat, and then so forth. Convenience is really important these days. Yet, I think our food became like a deteriorated in terms of the nutrition and quality. So, in a way, the food became more poisonous, more carcinogenic, and it lacks nutrition, and it has too much of something that you may not want to consume too much, such as sugar, salt, and fat. Fat itself is not that bad, but then the deep fried stuff really increase the calorie. And of course, the students who are craving for calorie may like to have the deep fried stuff or stir fried stuff, but no, I am not saying frying is bad by itself. But the oil used to produce almost all of these factory processed stuff, and including those restaurant stuff, is used in the genetically modified stuff. Canola is a GMO, and so is the soy oil or corn oil. These are the three major sources of the fat that is used in food processing, and they are carcinogenic in different degrees. I am not saying everything is too bad that you should stop eating right away, but the less the better for these things. So I think I want to raise awareness about what kind of food the students are eating. And so the first part of my kind of readings is about the danger of eating the industrial food. Industrial food meaning the food produced by the industrial agricultural process and the factory processing of this food. Now you watch those TV programs like food factories and then so forth in the food channel. You see that it is sanitized conditions, and there are a lot of good things happening. Like it is not so common these days to have a food poisoning out of the packaged food, particularly dried food and stuff that you buy from grocery stores. Of course, the salmonella and other E. coli contamination of the freshly ground beef and then so forth still continues. Yet, I think our food may become safe. But my question is, at what cost? Because most of this processed food contains a lot of preservatives, which is used as an industrial solvent, or a lot of bad things, and they are known to be carcinogen. And you have to use poison to control microbacteria from eating up and then destroying the content of the food. Therefore, you use poison to control the bacteria, but then you are really poisoning yourself by eating this food, even though the quantity that you get could be small at one time. But there is no toxicology study about confounding impact of having different source of carcinogens coming in all at once. Like you may think that your milk is safe, but if the cow milks are fed with something other than the fresh grass, there's a possibility of getting some contaminants into the milk. And of course, industrial processing of the milk that eliminates all this good stuff out of the milk, so it becomes like a calcium water. And you cannot really digest calcium without vitamin D. And they add the vitamin A, but then is it really digestible? No. This vitamin D has to be, like a fat soluble. So whenever you take fat out of the milk to create the skim milk and then bring back something, it doesn't really work because you're destroying the wholeness of the milk, and by doing so, you create a lactose intolerance. And so I think that industrial processing had made our life convenient on the surface, but I think it is really a precarious way of deriving the convenience and a low price. So I think the cost is really not reflected in the price, and our awareness really is so behind. So I think that's the first component of the class. Then I'm going to introduce all this food activism to really counter against them. So I introduced a lot of, say, rising tide of our organic movement or local farmers movement, which is really becoming important, community kitchen rising, and so forth, to really show the students the real examples all over the world, including Canada and Quebec and Montreal, what really is happening as a way of making our food safer and like improve our food sovereignty. We have to have a control over our food, and the degree is the sovereignty. Are you food sovereign? I think most people would say no, because we don't know where the food is from, who is producing our food, who is processing our food, and under what condition these are stored and then transported. If you know all this information, then you still is a good thing to eat, then you may have a sovereignty. But most of us, including myself, has to rely upon the market. I think corporations are driven by profit, so they abide by the rule. But when the rule is lax, there's a possibility of us getting a not so good product. So I'm afraid that our food became not so good as a result. And then I think there are people who are trying to take back the control. So growing the food by yourself is the first way. Some people say that, well, they are not really having a green thumb, so they destroy all these greens. So I think that for those students who want to really start, growing stuff, I introduce them to different activities on campus, including the greenhouse. You can learn from the beginning, or enroll in the city farm school, or you participate in the campus potager and other growing practices. And there are many students who start growing food at home. And from growing the food, they started cooking, and then cooking skills are really scarce these days because many students are too busy, or they are spoiled by the industrial food system. So for them, how to get the good food, or they even don't ask their mothers. The mothers will they'll open the freezer and get this ready-made stuff and then just warm it up in the microwave. So if you're really accustomed to this industrial way of getting the food, then you are not sovereign. Why? Because you don't know how to cook. So learning the cooking skills is another level. And sometimes it's really difficult to cook by yourself. So there are a group of students last semester, when they took my course, they worked with Aryan and learned how to cook, or be engaged in this self-cooking kind of ideas. And so I think it was, there are different ways, but then I think I want students to practice and then experience what does it mean to improve their food sovereignty by doing something that they were not accustomed to do, and then experience all this joy of doing something about food. Because I think in the end, it really brings ourselves back to the origin. And I also emphasize this importance of the bacterial system that we have in our intestine. And this has been kind of highlighted in the past 5 years or so as something really important. Like our gut flora is the second important immune system, because our bacterial system really fights against toxins and then bad stuff. And if you have a good culture, then we can really have a healthy life. And all this information is an important part of my class. So students get a lot of maybe sometimes contradictory messages about diet, or I'm going to introduce something that they never heard about, the relationship between food and illness, like the autism or learning disability. Why the incidence had really spiked up from 1990s. It coincides strangely with the introduction of genetically modified food. Of course, there is no study done about this phenomena. Why? Because Monsanto and other companies prevented the scientists from engaging in the research about this causal relationship between the GMO and illness in general for the human population. I think they control the academia and they control the scientific journals, and that's how. And then those who do say something against them were penalized. So there is this silence of the scientists about the GMO, and I think it is only the people like me, the sociologist, who may really criticize the practice and so forth, and some good journalists. And we have a very good series of documentaries made about Monsanto and other genetically modified food promoters. But I think these are what I introduce to students, like general, like a sociological observation of the power structure surrounding the food systems and how individuals and then groups and then community can regain their control over the food.